Aokigahara, or in short, Gahara, the suicide forest of Japan. This is a beautiful, vast, rugged, dense forest comprised of 12 square miles. One can expect bubbling brooks, dense soft moss with rocky, uneven terrain. Here, tall juniper trees grow with their roots gnarled and twisted in amongst the ancient lava rocks that lie beneath the tranquility. Several small caves are present, most of which fill with frozen ice during the coldest months of the year. Regardless of the season, the forest does remain a bit chilly, being at the foot of the legendary Mount Fuji. You might not, however, expect to find personal belongings left by those who entered, but never seemed to leave. Backpacks, partial bottles of water, perhaps a lady's brush or a cosmetic mirror. It is not uncommon to find tents or makeshift shelters of campsites, although overnight stays are prohibited. A place where park ranger-type positions are held by those who venture deep into the labyrinth of woods, seeking the bodies of suicide victims. These brave souls often follow ribbons and strings strung across the forest like cobwebs, leading to those who fell victim as prey. Today it is considered haunted by ghosts and has a kiss of death luring its victims like a twisted fairy tale. Join us if you dare for another installment of Nightmares on the Lost Highway, as tonight we dive deeper into the suicide forest of Japan.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So to preface this, first I want to say that we've said this in many episodes.
Many.
These names are in Japanese, and we're going to butcher them.
I can guarantee you.
Eric and I couldn't even agree on the pronunciation of Aokigahara.
Aokigahara.
So we're just going to say these with the American pronunciation for the spelling, and apologize to Japanese-speaking peoples, and we'll try harder in the future.
We're just a bunch of hillbillies here.
And before we go any further, we want to make sure that we cover this, and we'll talk about it again. We are in no way trying to glorify suicide with this. We've picked a location that is famous for its allure, but the site itself is a beautiful, beautiful forest, a beautiful piece of natural scenery, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. But if you're having thoughts of suicide, if you're thinking about it, remember there are people out there that can help. You've got people that care about you, rely on you.
People love you.
So we're gonna repeat this later too. But the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, the number is 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. So
please, if you have those thoughts, reach out for help.
Aokigahara, you could say in Japanese. I believe certain translations call it Blue Tree Meadow. It's also called the Sea of Trees. Those who have seen it say that it is a beautiful forest. There's lots of pictures online that you can look at.
It seriously looks like some of the scenes out of like Lord of the Rings or something.
It's
gorgeous.
Like a primeval forest, and it has its own unique, distinct look about it because of the way it was formed.
Lying literally right at the base of Mount Fuji.
Yeah. The trees are so thick that people say that the sunlight can hardly reach the ground. And native speakers in the region prefer that you say Aokigahara or Aokigahara Jukai instead of calling it the suicide forest. They don't like that name.
For obvious reasons, they're trying to steer away from that. However, as we were talking before, especially here in America, I think it's obviously easier to remember and say, and that's where that label's kind of got stamped.
Now, like you said, the Sea of Trees here sits on the northwestern flank of Mount Fuji on the island of Honshu of Japan. It's about a 2-hour drive west of Tokyo. It's 12 square miles and sits on a bed of hardened lava, left over from the last major eruption of Mount Fuji in 864 AD. Something I found interesting is that it's home to many, many caves. Yes. Obviously, being a lava field and lava tubes and pockmarks. 3, especially, you have the Nurasawa Ice Cave. It's a naturally frozen cave that stays frozen all year round. Even in summertime, the average temperature rarely gets above 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit inside the cave.
Very chilly.
It's also apparently a popular destination for tourists and school trips. So, then you have the Lakeside Bat Cave, which is home to a large population of bats. There's not as many bats in there now as there used to be, thanks to human development and depredations. We brought they brought this bat community almost to the brink of extinction, but now that they're protected, their numbers are on the rise. And then there's Fugaku Wind Cave, which is the largest of several lava tubes to be found throughout the forest. It is over 600 feet long and about 18 feet average in height. The reason it's called the Wind Cave is because it's large enough to have a wind pattern that blows through it. And it's I guess it's consistent enough that it's, that wind is pretty, and it travels unbroken.
Now, again, as Bill's describing this, and for those of you who may not be familiar, this isn't just some random forest that's hard to get to. This is like a national park. It's a very beautiful area. The Japanese government has, they upkeep it. There's huge parking areas.
Well, for example, all three of those caves that I talked about have been declared natural monuments of Japan since 1929. This is
long history.
Yeah, it's protected. It's a protected natural resource. Some parts of the forest are very, very dense, like we said before, and the porous lava rock helps to absorb sound. So they say there's a pervading sense of loneliness when you're in the Aokigahara, the Sea of Trees, that you just don't hear a lot of sound. There's not a lot of bird song. There are animals in the forest. For example, they have Asian black bear, moles, bats, mice, deer, foxes. Kind of the regular animals you'd expect to find.
Yeah.
However, they are very rare, very, very rarely seen by travelers in the forest. They tend to stick to the deeper paths.
Well, and again, with the park, there's the main path, if you will, that they suggest that you stay on, because it is easily to get lost. This forest is so dense, and there's some dangerous areas because of the old volcanic activity. There's a lot of jagged, sharp rocks and bluffs. So they have that main path kind of roped off. Obviously, it's not that big a deal to throw your leg over the rope, and you can take off even though you're not really supposed to.
Now, like we said earlier, due to its origins on a field of volcanic rock, the tree roots don't get to grow deeply into the ground. So a lot of the trees almost look like they're standing on top of the ground where their roots are sort of elevated.
That gnarled look, that's definitely a fantasy setting almost.
Like you said, something out of Labyrinth or Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Open pits are pretty common. One of the pictures I saw that I thought was kind of haunting was of a pool. One of those volcanic pits had filled with water, and it was almost... like when you see water in wintertime with the snow where it looks pitch black, that pool is just black.
Like black tar is almost what it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of haunting to look at. One of the things, like you said, you don't really expect to find when you're walking through the forest is there's a lot of human detritus left behind, human debris, shoes. They said bottles of beer and sake are pretty common. Mm-hmm. Suicide notes pinned to trees.
I've got a couple of those
ties
individual stories.
And clothes and things like that. Things that people have left behind.
Makeshift camps, tents.
And again, we don't want to...
Sleeping bag.
Yeah, we don't want to glorify suicide, but apparently, especially since the 1960s, the Sea of Trees here has become kind of synonymous with suicide, and again, leading to the westernized nickname, which, the suicide forest.
I did find, and I wanted to give the source, there is a YouTube documentary, and I believe it's from 2012, and it's simply titled Suicide Forest in Japan. But there was a Japanese scientist who is kind of the main spokesperson who they follow into the park, and he studies old volcanic activity, but he also donates his time there, I'll say loosely, as a park ranger, but also / counselor. So he goes into the forest, donates his time there. Apparently, it is not that uncommon to come across people who are camping. And again, as I previously stated, it's a national park, much like the ones here in America. You're in this one, you're not really supposed to be spending the night. It's visit by day, gone by dusk.
Well, and part of that is obviously due to the reputation.
Yes.
They don't want people there unsupervised, so to speak.
Right. But he comes across a lot of people who are camping out. And I will say, if he's any representation of the rest that work there, very calm, cool, collective, very polite. He would approach like tents where you could see where people were there, and he didn't rattle on the tent or beat on the door. Hey, you need to get out of here immediately. He would just kind of squat down next and, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything that you need? I don't want you to think that you're alone. You're not supposed to be spending the night here, but if you need to do you, that's fine. But, that documentary to me was one of the best source materials that I came across in researching this. In the opening of it, first let me give you his name, and I'll butcher this, but it's Azu Hanano, I believe is the way you pronounce his name. And again, I apologize. I probably butchered that.
Well, before we get too much further, a little personal anecdote. When I was my late teens, early 20s, I became fascinated with Japanese anime. Mm-hmm. And I thought to better enjoy anime, I would try to learn Japanese. I tried to teach myself Japanese. And what I almost immediately learned is that even when you write Japanese in English, we pronounce it the way it's written. That is almost 100% wrong.
It's lost in translation.
So just understand that, again, like I said, we're gonna mess these names up.
Well, this scientist, he's lived in the area for about 30 years, and as I stated previously, he studies volcanic eruptions and kind of the aftermath and then the rebirth. In the opening of it, the documentary follows him. He pulls his car into one of the designated parking areas, and he notes as he's walking through, and it was just so creepy because it was like an afterthought as the film crew was following him. And, of course, he's speaking in Japanese, but you have the captions on, and it says, he notes there's a white minivan that he's seen abandoned here in the parking lot, and it's sat there for several months. He says it's presumed to be left there by yet another victim who entered the forest but never returned to take the van away. And they kind of stop for a few moments there, and you notice that there's already pine needles and sticks and debris that started collecting on the hood, and kind of coated with dust. You can tell, just it hasn't been moved. And it's almost like nature was already starting to retake what was not natural to the forest. The camera kind of scans through the passenger window, and you can see a folded map that's there. They go through to kind of the back hatch window, and you can see a pair of sneakers and some duct tape and a backpack and just supplies. And he says this is very, very common. Again, I don't know if it's the Japanese culture or whatever, but there doesn't seem to be the urgency to remove a vehicle that's been parked there or abandoned for months. But it just kind of, to me, set the storyline that it's so sad that this is just, accepted. I'm not sure that's the best word for it. It's expected, I guess.
Well, as I was doing the research, one of the things that came up pretty quickly was that the Japanese don't share our westernized views sometimes on suicide. Not that it's an accepted practice, but it's not demonized the way it is in
right.
The Western religions. There are places in America where it's actually illegal to kill yourself. Mm-hmm. As if, after the fact they're going to be able to do anything about it. But in Japan, it's, especially even like feudal Japan, it was an honorable practice.
He actually mentioned, he said, in the old days of Japan, suicide was considered a most act of almost exclusive for samurais. In other cases, he said, with extremely poor families, the children would abandon their elders in the mountains when they could no longer care for them. And that was an honorable death. But these people at this time, they were not taking their lives because they couldn't adapt to society. It was more out of necessity, back hundreds of years ago. So yeah, obviously a lot has changed. But yeah, Japanese and American thoughts and philosophies are definitely different. In the lead-in part of this, and I think, Bill, you touched on it, as you go into the park, there are several visible active signs put out by the government talking about suicide awareness.
Yeah, I have a couple of those signs. They've got, really, I consider poignant messages on them. I got a couple of them here. Your life is something precious that was given to you by your parents. Mm-hmm. And then another example, think about your parents, siblings, and children once more. Do not be troubled alone. Yeah, and they have these signs all over the place. They've posted security cameras at the entrances. They've taken a lot of efforts to make taking your life difficult. Raise the height of bridge rails, train volunteers to talk to potentially suicidal visitors, even increase police presence at the entrances for, to watch for people who could be a danger to themselves.
Now, the scientist, he goes on to explain, he goes, locals don't commit suicide there. Very, 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 very seldom. He said as children, anybody that's close to the Mount Fuji area, he says as children, they're told, don't go there. It's a very scary forest. The path is open for the public. However, you can't follow the trail because the signs say, you get lost, stay directly on the path, that kind of stuff.
Aokigahara itself is sort of a strange location, obviously. Again, you have this forest that's grown up on the side of a mountain over a lava field. It has been claimed that compasses just do not behave properly inside the forest. Needles of magnetic compasses will move if placed directly on the lava due to the high iron content of the lava rock.
And that makes sense.
They do line with the rock's natural magnetism.
Mm-hmm.
The rock's natural magnetism. He's a good-looking guy, right?
Yeah.
But this does vary by the iron content, the strength, and by location. However, if you hold a compass up at normal height, it will function properly. So that it's just a side effect of the iron and magnetism inside the lava. But the ground's high iron content does affect GPS and cell phone signals.
And again, that makes perfectly good sense.
So again, yeah, if you're in there and you're cut off from, and the GPS getting lost.
We've talked about that with some of our ghost hunting and stuff, that could possibly drain batteries. That kind of gives humans often a kind of a nausea, vertigo feeling. Going back to the scientists, basically over the last 20 years, there are over 100 suicides that are actually documented in the forest. And there could be many, many more that just haven't been discovered.
I have here, this is the second most popular suicide destination in the world, second only to the Golden Gate Bridge, which people pointed out it is, we don't call it the Suicide Bridge.
Right.
So why does Aokigahara get saddled with that nickname?
Yeah.
It said that it's estimated that yearly 50 to 100 people walk into the forest and never return. Now, those aren't necessarily all suicides. It is extremely easy to get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And with the caves and volcanic pits,
just like mountain climbing or anything else, yeah, slip and fall, accidentals.
But there are annual searches conducted by police, volunteers, and journalists, and that started in 1970. But I think in 2010 is one of the years I specifically had here. 247 people attempted suicide in the forest. 54 of those were successful. So these rates do increase in March, which happens to coincide with the end of the fiscal year in Japan. So possibly financial worries and struggles could be a motivator in some of those. As of 2011, the most common means of suicide have been hanging and drug overdose.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, to kind of help clarify to some of these stories, as you would go into the forest and these are rangers and volunteers, there's often signs of long ribbons and strings leading down from the main trail deeper into the forest. These are left by those that they say are still indecisive about their decision for suicide. And the thought is it would be much like in spelunking or caving, you would leave a string to be able to follow your way back out so you didn't get lost. So obviously if people are doing this, either one, they're just trying to camp and they want to find their way back, or as the scientists were saying, that they're still trying to make up their mind about ending their life or how they want to handle it. It is unfortunate that the park rangers often find many of the bodies, though, by following these strings and ribbons. Now, you have to remember, again, this forest is huge. It's vast. It's 12 square acres. It's not flat. It has rolling hills, creeks, caves, jagged bluffs, outcroppings, as Bill and I were talking about. It's not uncommon, like in the recording of the YouTube documentary, they came across an old campsite by following some of these ribbons and string. And when you come across a campsite, the rangers are talking that it's always very scary for them because why is it still there?
Well, I can't imagine a job like that. You don't know what you're going to walk up on.
You may find a body inside, or you may find suicide notes, or, it would have to be a very grief-burdening job, to have that to go out. In one example, they followed the trail of ribbons for some distance, and at first it took them to a tent site. They were very happy to find there was no body there, so they thought, okay, this is a good thing. However, they noticed more strings and ribbons, so they continued to fall. And they came across, and I thought this was an interesting story, that's why I chose to share it. It was a large, I would say close to 3-foot tall cloth doll turned upside down, and its feet were tied to the tree with rope, and its arms and hands were, strung, drooping down up past its head. It had a nail through the chest and 2 nails through each of the hands.
This is the worst possible spinoff of Toy Story you could ever describe.
Yeah. I hadn't even put that connection together, but, absolutely, yes. And so they're looking at this, the park rangers and stuff, as they're documenting, and they're like, wow. And they were trying to explain, why? Why is this here? And they went on, they thought, well, maybe it's a prank or maybe it's a joke. However, in Japanese society, this is actually a sign of oppression or someone tortured by society in their life. Just a short distance away from this upside-down crucified type doll, they had taken a piece of wood and made kind of a makeshift sign and nailed it, very similar nail and similar height to a tree. And in Japanese, it simply read suicide note. So as they went on to explain this, they're saying this person obviously put a lot of thought into this. They were probably there many days, and the park ranger kind of broke down and said, maybe if we could have found them sooner, we could have stopped them. They're still hopeful at this point that the individual made it out. The name, which I won't say, but it was written on one side of the wooden note, and then simply the words, "I came here because nothing good ever happened in my life. Don't look for me." It's just so tragic, and the ranger speculates on the poor soul. They believe they were hesitant to die, otherwise they wouldn't have taken the time to leave such markings or recordings. They obviously wanted to be found, or they wanted these items to be found as they were trying to tell their story. When he says when they come in, like you had mentioned, hanging and drug overdoses seems to be the most typical. Hangings, I think, was slightly the highest. The path they continued to follow, and as they kind of come up over top of a hill, they actually saw 4 ropes kind of woven, intertwined together to make a stronger rope, was swinging in the wind from a branch. Now, the noose section that would go around your neck had been cut off. So that to them told them they had been found, and obviously that's how they lowered the body. These ropes were still hung in the tree, which was very creepy. Again, the person was assumed to be found, that they'd hung themselves. The ropes, they said they left intentionally, one, because they were too hard to climb up the tree to take down, but in Japanese culture, it seems a little bit weird to us, but for them it was kind of more so a sign of respect and yet a sign of caution and understanding. So again, just kind of setting that light. The Japanese have a total different way of thinking about things than, the Americans. I think in America, we definitely would have cut down all the ropes. We would have tried to erase any sign of that.
Yeah. Well, it was believed that the practice of ubasute was practiced at Aokigahara well into the 19th century. This would be, we would call it sinocide, I believe is the phrase, the word. But this is basically where the infirm or the elderly would be carried or would themselves leave the village or the home to find some remote and desolate place to be left to die. So now, according to Japanese historians, that was never really a common practice in Japan. But it is worth noting that Japan's elderly population is noted for its above average suicide rate, even for Japan. So
that's kind of a Native American tradition I've read a lot about. The Indians would go off to basically have an honorable death.
Now, some Japanese spiritualists believe that due to the suicides and the number of people that have passed away in Aokigahara, that those dark energy, the negative spiritual energy, if you will, has permeated the trees, generating possible paranormal activity and possibly preventing those who do die there from leaving this realm. So along those lines, I was going to talk a little bit about the Japanese yurei.
Well, I think your statement there, again, if you're a believer or a skeptic, when you have that type of tragic things reoccurring, I know I have felt that way in different areas, so I definitely understand that.
Now, when we say yurei in America, in the Western world, we would say that was a kind of ghost. But they're the spirits of those that were left behind to die, or the spirits of those who died with unfinished business. Translates roughly into faint spirit in English. But according to the traditional Japanese beliefs, all humans have a soul. And when a person dies, the soul, or the rikon, leaves the body and enters purgatory. And there it waits for proper funeral and post-funeral rites to be performed, so that it may leave this realm and travel on and join its ancestors. Now, when people die in a sudden or violent manner, such as murder or suicide, obviously, these rites are not performed. They're not performed in a timely fashion. There's no one there to do them.
Business is not done.
Yep. Or it's possible even that if the rites are performed, if the spirit is under the influence of powerful emotions, it may not feel that it can proceed on to join their ancestors. But at that point, the recon is believed to transform into a yurei, which can bridge the gap between both the spiritual and the physical world. This is a spiritual entity which has the ability to influence the physical world around it. So again, very much like what we would call in the West a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And really, in Japanese lore, this emotion doesn't have to be particularly strong or have a particular drive. Just any kind of emotion or unfinished business which may keep that spirit from feeling like it can move on to that next plane. Even a fairly harmless thought. Just anything that kind of makes it feel like you have unfinished business. Anything... And the way I kind of equate it is that nagging thought of like when you walk into a room and you're like, well, why am I here? I mean, just those kind of, that low level, like I have unfinished
almost an
business.
annoyance, yeah.
Yeah, but even those kind of thoughts are enough to interrupt the transition of the soul. And once that thought enters the mind of a dying person, their yurei will return to complete the action of that final thought. It before it can return to that cycle of reincarnation, it has to finish its business. So... I mean, especially in the case where maybe a person goes out there and they're thinking, this is it. And then, like last minute, like, no, I don't really want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That spirit doesn't get to transition. And so it's still there.
Very uneasy.
Now they will continue to exist on Earth until they can be laid to rest, either by performing the proper rituals or helping them resolve their emotional conflict that tie it to the physical world. Traditionally, typically the more violently they died, or the more harshly they were treated when they were alive, the more powerful a ghost they will be. So those people that were done, horrifically wrong will be
the most powerful.
Yeah, the most powerful, most dangerous.
As you're saying this, I'm having flashbacks of, I'll show my age here, the old movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg, and she starts channeling all these spirits that just come up, and they all have a story. They're all trying to complete their business. Contact my wife, my mother, I need to tell them this. And she gets to the point of just like, back off.
As far as the appearance of the yurei, and if you watch a lot of scary movies, I'm not going to tell you anything you haven't heard before. They typically appear in white clothing with black hair. Their hands will dangle lifelessly from their wrists, which they often hold outstretched, kind of a zombie-esque appearance, I guess. Usually they'll lack feet or legs. They'll just kind of be hovering in the air, kind of wispy.
Kind of envision a specter.
Usually they're depicted as being accompanied by a pair of floating flames. I would compare that to a will-o-wisp.
Okay, yeah.
Or they call it a hitodama in Japanese lore. Those little wisps will be in eerie, spooky blue, green, purple colors. And these are actually separate parts of the yurei. They're not separate spirits that travel with it, but it's actually a manifestation of that same spirit.
Energy source emitting off of it.
Aokigahara is also said to be the haunt of a tengu, which, if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, tengu aren't necessarily seen as a bad thing, but in Japanese lore, it's a particularly impulsive or unpredictable bird spirit.
It was like, you sparked my interest right there. I was like, I've heard of this. I've heard of this.
And also, there are other additional spirits that are of the human variety, obviously due to the tragedies that kind of regularly happen there.
Now, there's different theories about what is causing, one, the suicides to occur in the forest, and more importantly, why it does seem to be on an upward trend, increasing. I'm no doctor, I'm no scholar, but with my own studies and research for this podcast, I think not so long ago, we were people that got out more. We visited. We were working. We were talking face-to-face, having that interaction. Maybe on the weekends, whatever floats your boat. Maybe you were out with at a bar with friends. Maybe you played card games. Maybe you played role-playing games. But that one-on-one, face-to-face, in much of today's society, we do a lot less of that. Some do it almost non-existent at all, due to technology being so grand and the creation of the internet and online.
It's ironic that a lot of people say technology brings us together and allows us to connect around the world.
I think that was a sales pitch to get us to do it.
Yeah, at the same time, you are still a person in a room behind a computer screen or looking at a phone. You and I are, similar age. To me, nothing beats actually going and talking to a person face to face.
Absolutely.
And I enjoy sitting at a table playing games with friends or family.
I remember, and again, I'm going to show my old fuddy-duddiness here, when phones came out with text, I'm like, why in the world would I want to text anybody? I just want to call them.
I literally refused to pay for texting on my cell phone for probably the first 5 years.
I did too. Now I find myself, I've fallen in kelter with everyone else.
You don't call anybody anymore.
Yeah,
you just text. You just send words across the ether. You don't even hear their voice.
But again, today, I mean, we run businesses online. We speak to others. At best, we might have a voice online. We order our groceries, for Pete's sake. Heck, Amazon is getting to the point where even drones are going to deliver this stuff to your front porch.
There won't even be a stranger outside your door that you ignore.
The truck driver that you can run out and try to say hi to. I believe as humans, we need that face-to-face intervention. How else can we hear a voice to see an expression and truly understand each other? With 2 grown children myself, and I remember the age when my daughter and even son, they would have relationships, and somebody would break up with the other person over a text.
Oh, man.
And I'm just like, what? I mean, I won't get into that, but it's just like, that's so disturbing. We are depriving ourselves of our natural instincts, our primal desires, if you will, by living this way. To some, this is just too much to grasp, too much to comprehend. They grew up in this, and they don't know that former lifetime ago, if you will. And it does relate to feeling alone, sad, misunderstood. And you may not even make the connections to understand why you're feeling this way. And then, as I have had people explain to me, Facebook and the different sites that are out there, man, Bill, when we grew up, if we did something stupid, and I said but when we did something stupid, there wasn't a gazillion cameras around to record it and to preserve it forever.
There wasn't a permanent record of it.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to tell that story, which
20 years later or whatever.
You have to tell that story. You can't just send a video to somebody. You have to sit there in a room and say, oh, man, I remember when me and Uncle Mike got lost in the woods, or, we did this or we did that. You had to tell the story. That's what we're doing here, like you and I. Part of why we do this is just so that you and I can get together from time to time and tell each other stories.
Yeah. And today's younger generation, honestly, I feel sorry for them, because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has bad days. Everybody does stupid stuff. I don't care who you are. If you say you're not, you're a liar. But now it's recorded, so you have a bad day at school, whatever. You trip, you fall down the steps. But now everybody and their neighbor and all the different countries are seeing it, and you can't ever escape that.
Dude, it is so bad that it has permeated our pop culture. I watched a movie with my kids just recently called Ron's Gone Wrong, about these little, it's kind of an Apple parody, but they build these little robots that the kids use as companions. And part of a big plot point of that movie is that this one little girl does something, she is involved in something kind of ridiculous, and her little assistant films it and posts it on the internet, and then that's what she becomes known as. Her entire life is ruined at 12 years old because there's a video online of something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy, but kind of stepping back a little bit, in Japanese society, I have to say, and I didn't understand it until I started doing more research, there's actually, I think, more pressure there in that country than what we even have here that we're describing. In Japan, you are to become successful. In many ways, you're expected to help support your family, whether it be younger siblings, your parents, even grandparents, heck, maybe even great-grandparents. It has been that way for centuries. With fewer young adult children to help do their part to support families, it's kind of spiraling out of control. For some, still trying to live in that lifestyle, it makes it very difficult, almost impossible, for some to ever be able to leave their house and go back out, as old culture and I'll say new technology, they're mixing like water and oil.
If you look at that, you can see how that puts pressure on a family. And again, it used to be you'd have multiple children. And birth rates are declining across the world. So, there are fewer children being born to take care of the older generations, which, especially in Japan, that was the cycle of life. That younger generation helped take care of that older generation.
You would be in one large house with the whole family living together. And with the people that are still brought up with that belief, and I think it's a very honorable belief, but I can understand why you would think that you would fail.
Well, and for some people,
I mean, if you didn't have that job paying $100,000+ a year, I mean, you think about it, you're supporting a lot of people.
Well, and for some people, I feel it could also be the opposite too, though. There's so many people, especially in places like Tokyo, that you're practically living on top of each other.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know about you. I get uncomfortable in a crowd. If I was around that many people all the time, it would just be too much.
Yeah, I saw reference, and it's been a couple of years back, but like, I want to say a typical apartment, I mean, like a 10 by 20 or something. It was very, very small. But, well, then, of course, it goes without saying we had 2020 and the whole COVID thing. And I mean, as if it wasn't bad enough already, that obviously that hit multiple countries, Japan included. And think about all the quarantine restrictions that were then applied, again, to your point, maybe in these small apartments or in a large family household. That adds so much stress. I mean, I can definitely see the Japanese government reported that, of course, just like in America, there was a huge spike in 2020 of overall suicides. And it's spiraling. But in Japan, I think a lot of it goes back to that old culture, the belief, and new culture and that technology that we were all sold upon. This is going to make your life easier, and this is going to give you more time with your family. And now, instead of, we went from a landline to a pager to a zipper case phone, now to a cell phone. You can't even go to the restroom anymore without getting texts and phone calls.
You used to be able to get away from your phone. You could simply just, I'm not home, nobody can call me.
I'm going to go out on the back porch. I can't hear the phone ring inside. Yeah, I'm going to have a barbecue with my family or whatever.
I'll admit that, I'm just as guilty as anybody else, and I'm addicted to the device. I can't get by without the internet,
I don't think I could either. It's sad to say, but it's truthful.
Yeah, but I feel like I got to be, I'm looking at news, or I'm not a big social media guy, but I am kind of a Reddit junkie, so I'm constantly, swiping through. Seriously, I've probably swiped through miles and miles of Reddit over the, just, and yeah, like you said, take it to the bathroom with me. I take it, my phone's in my pocket all the time.
And I won't get into a lot of this, but I mean, depending on what your job is, I know I had a former job that you're expected to answer your phone 24/7. It doesn't matter what you're doing or where you're at. I've been called on my vacation and asked to cancel my vacation to come into the plant to take care of business.
Now, I didn't necessarily have to be connected 24/7, but I do remember sitting in an aquarium in New Orleans and being informed that I had 3 different team members quit. So, yeah, I couldn't even enjoy my vacation without finding out what was going on at work.
Yeah, nobody needs that.
So we're going to talk about Aokigahara. We're going to talk about the sea of trees here. I feel like I definitely need to take a moment to talk about noted YouTube asshole. Sorry, Eric. YouTube star Logan Paul.
Yeah, no offense here.
Based on the content of the video, I can only say that this guy was being fairly disrespectful. And I'm not a big fan. Honestly, I'm gonna tell you, as far as people who make a living on YouTube, there are very few of them that I actually enjoy. And guys like him, he's very low on my list of people.
Not one of them.
He posted a video on December 31st, 2017, of himself and his little entourage encountering a dead body inside of Aokigahara. Obviously, he received a ridiculous amount of flack for it and took it down the next day. But even in that amount of time, it had over 6 million views.
Which is exactly what he was going for.
Yeah. Now, he did issue a pair of apologies. One was in written form and one was in video form. And in the video, he implied that he was making this video in the interest of suicide awareness. He wanted to make sure people were aware. Now, based on some of the dialogue in the video, which I believe includes a scene where one of his little companions is, hey man, I'm not comfortable being here. And Paul there is all, oh, well, you afraid to be around a dead body? Yeah. It doesn't seem like he was very concerned about suicide awareness.
Yeah.
So
more on ratings only.
That's pretty tasteless, and just somebody trying to get some views. So again, I mean, it's just disrespectful. It's ridiculous. It's just somebody trying to make a buck off somebody else's pain, and I can't stomach that. Yep. I just wanted to take a minute to slander this guy.
Yep.
I think we're closing in on the end here. So just to say, you can currently tour Aokigahara. The tours are not suicide tours. They're not ghost tours. They're not haunted tours.
No.
This is a tour of the forest. This is a tour of the natural beauty that you're going to see there. There are numerous tours and trips that start at Tokyo, and they will take tourists to the forest. You can travel alone or with a guide. The average tour costs about $200 or so, and that would include transport to and from Tokyo. Don't expect a ghost tour, like I said. Don't expect a guide to the forest, dark history.
They are not wanting to embrace that portion.
The locals want to push that reputation aside and portray this as the beautiful natural site that it is.
It would be like us going to Yosemite or Yellowstone National Park. I mean, that's take in the beauty of nature.
So the tours will focus on areas of natural beauty and the attractions. Now, tours can take 10 or up to 12 hours. But there are spots there for people to purchase refreshments and souvenirs. So they give you, opportunities to wet your whistle. Now, having said all that, I said we would say this one more time before we go. If you're suffering, if you're struggling, there are people out there that care. There are people that you can talk to. I think we've all gone through some dark patches in our life.
Yes.
And I will say even something like this podcast, find someone that you can talk to that's a friend of yours and record it. And that'll make a big difference.
It helps
I
just to
look
talk.
forward to the opportunities to sit down and record this podcast. They kind of help.
Absolutely.
And the time I spend, researching it, keeps me from dwelling on the things I probably shouldn't. But if you need help, if you're struggling, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-TALK-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. And just reach out for help if you need it.
Yes, please.
Don't think for a moment here that anywhere in the last 30, 40 minutes that we're glorifying suicide. We absolutely are not. It is a kind of a dark part of the world. It fits in very well with what we do on this podcast, but it's not something we advocate for. Get the help that you need.
Absolutely. Well, with closing, we do hope that you've enjoyed yet another installment of what you will find on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thanks for all for listening. We'd like to give a shout out to our first paying sponsor, Raven's Loft. That's our family shop here located in Lebanon, Missouri. It's your one-stop gaming, vintage toy, and collectible shop where you can find Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, comics, vinyl records, role-play gaming, Magic the Gathering, and so much more. We're located here at 223 West Commercial, downtown Lebanon, and also in our second location, also here in Lebanon at the Heartland Antique Mall. We'd like to thank Raven's Loft for again supporting Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are